All right, halfway house mobile edition. Back out here in shirts on this 7.3. I did injector cups and injectors and some other bullshit on it a while back. About 2 years later, had injector issues. It had a bunch of injector codes, and he's like, man, it's been running good. And he's like, it keeps running out of oil, and so I mean, it has oil leaks everywhere. And unplugged the ICP sensor, and it's just got a river of oil flowing out of it, you know. So put an ICP sensor on it, fill it back up with correct oil. He had like 10W40 or some bullshit in it, and it really didn't run very good at all, you know. So I'm like, okay, well, let's pull the fucking fuel filter out. So sure enough, pull the fuel filter out. It's completely full of oil, which means it smoked the injector O-rings. So he's like, well, can we just reseal it? And I said, dude, I mean, these are eBay injectors that, you know, are 2 years old, and it's probably mainly the, I did throw an IDM in it just to see if that fixed anything, and it didn't. But yeah, and I was like, yeah, we can, you know, you're going to pay the labor about the same, you know, to just swap new O-rings in, throw it back in, and you still might have injector issues. Or we can just, you know, put injectors in it and, you know, whatever. But I told him, I was like, man, you know, those cheap eBay injectors are known to have shitty O-rings, so you can get the shitty injectors with the shitty O-rings, and then I'll swap good O-rings over if you want. We can do that. And he said, nah, fuck it, we'll risk it, because this thing has 410,000 miles on it, and it's, this side doesn't look too bad, the other side's beat to fuck. But anyway, so what else did I do? Actually, I think that was it. Just put injectors in it. I think that was it. Put injectors in it, and that ICP sensor, yeah, fucking ran awesome. But yeah, so he wasn't leaking all the oil out externally. It was blowing past the O-rings and getting in his fuel. But anyway, that's pretty common on these. Yeah, so we put another 5,000 or 6,000 miles on it and called him back. Like, man, it fucking died. It was a little low on oil. We topped it off. You know, I can spray ether and it'll fire right up. I think it's got a fuel issue. I'm like, okay, it's probably got a high pressure oil issue, but I'll go out there and look at it. So I come out here and look at it. Battery's completely dead. Starter's fucking fried. And then, so I do some digging, you know, while I'm here, but there's not a whole lot I can do with completely dead batteries. So two things. I find that he topped it off with, who knows what that is, but some 5W20, which is, I'm sure, way too thin for these. It was only building, okay, well, I'll get to that, but, and this is the other issue. So, took the Creed CD out, but it didn't seem to be the issue. Still had no voltage. So I had time to get a starter and charge the batteries for me. I'll come back. So did that, came back, put the starter on, charge the batteries. You know, turns over, crank no start. Building 11 psi of oil pressure. So I'm like, okay, probably an IPR, could be an H-pop, could be a high pressure oil leak with those shitty new fucking eBay injectors. Need to do some more digging. So he's like, what do you think? And I said, well, so I did more digging. So I told him for sure we need to change the fucking oil, put 1540 in it, and I'll show you the IPR pigtail was completely smoked. And I kind of thought that this was going to be the issue. Completely trashed. Yeah, you can tell it's bare wire, and that's all rotted out. Completely full of fucking oil. So I changed that out, changed the oil, and it started building 26 psi. I think these need, like 700 or 800 to start. Okay, we got a high pressure oil issue. I have to bring my little test kit, rather than just throwing fucking parts at it. Oh, these aren't very comfortable. So I was like, okay, we need to isolate the issue and see if it's coming from, because I already put the pigtail on it. So it's either not actually getting the voltage there, or it's got a leak under the valve covers, or it's got a high pressure leak under the valve covers, like from the O-ring on the injector, the top O-ring. Excuse me, or you know, needs an H-pop or needs an IPR. So ideally, you want to, you know, rig up a pigtail where you can plug it directly into the IPR and give it 12 volts from the battery. Because then you'll know for sure that's not an issue in the wiring or the computer or whatever. I'm not sure if that's the PCM or the IDM that commands or that sends the the voltage supply to the IPR to, you know, open it and close it. But anyway, I forgot mine, so I didn't do that today. But basically, I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna guess it's probably the IPR. So this is an ICP sensor. This is an adapter to the quick connect oil, high pressure oil line, and this one is just a plug. So basically, you deadhead the pump to completely isolate the ICP sensor and the HPOP. Oh yeah, before I get too far, I did pull the plug off the reservoir. It was full of oil. I did pull the cover off down there and made sure the bolt was still there and it was tight. It was. So I kind of, you know, with the reservoir being full of oil, I assume it's not a low pressure oil problem. And with the bolt tight, I don't think it's slipped on the shaft of the HPOP itself. Just recently, I've been hearing people fucking change out the oil in there, and I guess they think that oil just stays in there and just circulates for the high pressure oil system, but that's absolutely not true. That fills up from the low pressure oil. So like if I pull that plug out and there was no fucking oil in there, then I know that I have a low pressure oil problem because it's not even filling the reservoir, so of course it's not building pressure. But if you pull that plug out and it's fucking full, then you know that you do have, you know, low pressure oil. I don't know why people change that oil out because it does circulate through the entire fucking engine, but whatever. Apparently it's really common. I'd never heard of it till maybe a month ago. Anyway, so I did all that, you know, to further diagnose it. Okay, I don't think it's a low pressure oil issue, and the bolt hasn't come off the gear on the HPOP. So basically, obviously put my new pigtail on there for the IPR. I unplugged the ICP sensor, you know, while I'm trying to diagnose it. It didn't make a difference. Still wouldn't even almost start. So I'm like, okay. And it was brand new ICP, a good ICP sensor too. So basically, deadhead the pump. And then if it builds pressure here, then you know that your issue is under the valve covers on the injector O-ring. So I did that. Still builds 26 psi. So I'm like, okay. I did bring a good IPR with me, so I'm going to try that first. And like I said, ideally you want to command 12 volts to it, which I forgot mine at the house, so I didn't have that. But just like, what the hell, I'll swap the IPR and see what it does. So I swapped the IPR, immediately builds 1800 psi. So I know that the problem is the IPR. So basically, you know, you spend more time diagnosing it. And you know, actually, I just recently bought these, so and that was like 170 bucks, you know, so it's not cheap, but I was able to correctly diagnose it and save the customer some money rather than like, well, fuck, let's throw an HPOP on there and let's throw an IPR, and then, you know, labor and parts and shit, you're looking at $1,000 or so, and then it still has an issue, you know. So then you got to pull the fucking valve covers off, pull the injectors out, and try to find a bad O-ring, you know, and then you might find one, and then you just wasted a bunch of time because you didn't diagnose it correctly. So, you know, if you don't know how to do it correctly, then you need to pay somebody else to do it, or just, you know, I mean, learn. I mean, it might take you a long time and some money, but quit listening to people on Facebook when you say, hey, my truck quit running, and then they're like, oh, it's for sure your FICM or your IDM or you need injectors, or, you know, because they don't fucking know. They're not even there. You put one sentence, you just said it doesn't run. How the fuck can they diagnose it? They can't. So sometimes it's worth it to take it to a shop, and if you're semi-mechanically inclined and you just don't know how to diagnose it, pay them to diagnose it and then do it yourself. You know, it's because I come from like old school, you know, like classic cars and antiques and shit, and the diesel shop I was working at, you know, he'd been trying to hire me for years. I was like, man, I really don't know a whole lot about diesels. He's like, dude, it's just all fucking nuts and bolts, you know, and he's right, other than the diagnosing side. So if you fucking work at Jiffy Lube, and, well, if you're a good employee at Jiffy Lube and you know what the fuck you're doing there, at least, you could probably do most of this shit if you have it correctly diagnosed by somebody else. There's not really anything hard about them if you know what you're doing, or if you know how to diagnose it. So I highly recommend paying somebody that knows what the fuck they're doing to at least diagnose it. It'll save you money and time in the long run, and I've seen it so many fucking times. You know, well, fuck, that's a ripoff. I don't have $100 to spend to diagnose it, but then they'll just throw parts at it for 2 fucking months, and $8,000 later, they still don't have a truck that fucking runs. So don't do that. Another trick that I've never actually done, but I just saw this the other day. So say you hook this shit up, you got good pressure. So then you're like, okay, well then the issue has to be under the valve covers. So it has to be that injector O-ring. So then they actually make, and I have one, I've never used it, but they make a jumper for this, and it's not long enough, you'd have to extend it, but basically, so this is, from what I can tell, is the same as your ICP sensor. So if you didn't have another ICP sensor, you could pull this out, and where, I don't know if you'll see it, but so that's your high pressure oil rail. So obviously this head's the exact same, so it'd be in the back. So you pull that plug out, you unscrew this thing. That's your exhaust back pressure sensor. So you plug that into the you screw it into the head with your jumper. Plug this shit in, and then you can monitor your voltage to your exhaust. With a scanner, you monitor your voltage to your exhaust back pressure sensor, and make sure your voltage is between your ICP sensor. And obviously you put it back together. So this would be back in the head, this head. Then this would be in this head. And then with your jumper, you can hook them both back up and you can watch the voltage. So say one has good voltage, one doesn't, then okay, well that side's got a high pressure oil leak. So then you don't have to pull both valve covers and pull all fucking 8 injectors out. And then, you can kind of narrow it down. And that'll save you a bunch of time and save your customer some money. So that's a pretty cool trick. I've actually never seen a high pressure oil leak on a 7.3, but it does happen. So those are just some tips and tricks on how to correctly diagnose these, because okay, well, I had to spend 170 bucks on this little kit. I could have just bought an IPR for that, but these people keep calling me back, because I don't do that, and to me that's worth something, that they have faith in your ability to correctly diagnose something. Because if I did an IPR and it wasn't it, and I did the pigtail, that wasn't it, and then did an H-pop and that wasn't it, then he's probably gonna say, fuck you, I'm gonna take it to somebody else. You just wasted a bunch of money. So diagnose it to the best of your abilities. If you can't figure it out, pay somebody else to do it, but don't just throw parts at it. And it's really a must with 6 liters and 7.3s. I wish I had another. I have one, I just can't find it. And a known good ICP sensor. Have a good known IPR valve. Shit like that. Save your pigtail if you have a good one, or actually the injector connector is the same. This is really uncomfortable to get down, but make your pigtail your little harness so you can run your IPR pigtail directly to battery and demand, or I guess you'd command 12 volts, so it's opening. So then it's not something in the wiring or the computers. So save that kind of shit, make yourself shit like that rather than just throw parts at it, because that doesn't make any sense, and it wastes your time, and you kind of lose credibility. And I'm an hour from home right now, and actually I was pissed off because this fucking socket, snap-on fucking socket, isn't deep enough. Actually, it's deep enough. It's that hole isn't big enough for this to fucking fit through. Luckily he had one, so I borrowed his, and that's 1 1/8 inch. That's for the IPR. That's what this is. This is the bad IPR. Anyway, so I'm kind of pissed off about that. I guess I'm gonna have to drill that out a little bit. It's so close, it just doesn't quite fit. Anyway, so it's hard and it's frustrating, but I mean, if I didn't have the right tool, I had to drive an hour back home and an hour back out here. You can't charge him for that, so just try your best and just do shit right the first time. But there's always shit you can't predict, and then you run into shit that like all this shit's all fucking laying in the valley. He's got fucking vacuum leaks. I actually unhooked the map sensor because it was in the fucking way. But anyway, correctly diagnose shit. And that's a 7.3. Hopefully you learned something. And if you're new to this, watch Diesel Tech Ron shit, man. He's pretty sharp. Some of the shit I mean, very little of the shit, I'm like, man, why the fuck did he do it like that? But he knows a lot more than I do. Anyway, so kind of just gather information from everyone you can, except for the people that say that oil doesn't circulate and that's just high pressure oil only and it just stays in there forever, because that's absolutely not true. Obviously it's not true, because when you have a fucking oil leak from your injector O-ring and it gets into your fuel side of the injector, and then all your oil goes into there and you're running out of oil, obviously it's circulating. It's not just taking your I forget how much is in there. It's like a quart or something, or maybe more. Actually I think it is more, but anyway, so obviously that shit is circulating. But anyway, this thing's needs some love. But I'm gonna pull this IPR back out. It's probably midnight, so I'm gonna get the fuck out of here, go home, maybe get some sleep, probably not, eat something. Anyway, diagnose it correctly, or pay somebody that can, or keep watching videos, but don't throw parts at it. Makes no sense. Anyway, see y'all later.